Hi, I'm Lily, a 16-year-old girl. This is my life story. My dad recently got married in April of this year. His new wife, my stepmother, is amazing. She's 10 years younger than him, gorgeous, and is incredibly thoughtful and laid back. She has her own daughter, 17F, let's call her Alice. She is the girl who makes me feel envious of and leads my life to another way. Actually, I did not have a good upbringing and grew up without care from my parents. After 6 years of loveless marriage, they decided to go their separate ways when I was 7. A short time later, after leaving my mom, my dad remarried to someone I despise. She was horribly abusive to me, which led to both me and her neglecting my personal health and hygiene. I grew up alternative, different hand-me-down, clothing that never fit, dyed and cut hair, tattoos and facial piercings. I always kind of felt othered from other girls because of this. Some years later, the marriage broke down with that evil woman. My dad moved on. He married different women on and off. To be clear, he is not the problem here. But there was the thing that I was always concerned about. It was my relationship between my dad and my stepsister Alice. I was crazy jealous of his love for her. He always acts like she's his biological daughter, takes her to school every day, asks her everything that happens at school, then they eat dinner together. Even, he takes her to her softball games, basically stuff that he never did with me before. Sometimes I feel lost in my own house, shrink myself, and strange to my father. Me and my dad become more distant. I remember once it had rained heavily after school. I'd waited for a long time to hope my dad came and picked me up. After 15 minutes, 30 minutes, then 1 hour, and finally, he didn't appear, so I walked home with pain and depression. After that, I knew that the reason why my dad couldn't come to pick me up was because of my stepsister. My dad and stepmom watched Alice's dance competition that day. I screamed and blamed my dad for forgetting me, and he slapped me in my face. My world collapsed at that moment, so I decided to do one thing I thought I've never ever done in my life. I ran away from home after that argument with my dad. For 1 week, cut off all contact with the outside world. During that time, I was stuck in sadness, in the depths of anguish, isolated. My dad tried to contact me, went looking for me. He said sorry and also felt guilty for not caring for me for a long time. Then I came back home, but there is still loneliness in my mind. And I know that my affection for my dad is not like it used to be. Since that day, we've always been in the Cold War area. More than that, I see myself as a less beautiful girl compared to my stepsister. I don't know what I was thinking, but look at my stepsister. She's quite pretty, she has no curfew, she has sleepovers all the time, and she takes really good care of herself. Her clothes are always fresh and pretty, she curls her hair every morning, and she smells and looks good all the time. And what about me? I'm very sloppy, not well dressed, have a big build like a man, and always feel self-conscious and unattractive. I know I'm selfish when I say that. God gave her everything, even my dad. And when I look back on my life, I have nothing. From jealousy, I began to hate Alice. For me, she was just a thorn in my side. I didn't understand why I hated her so much. Whenever I saw her, I just wanted she would never appear in my life as quickly as possible. In my opinion, she is the cause of all my problems in my whole life. She took everything from me. Also, my dad's caring. Hatred created more hatred. I made a bad decision that Alice would disappear from my sight so I could get my attention and love from my dad. My mind was blinded by hatred, and I did the worst thing ever by harming her most cruel treatment, just wanting her to disappear. So I tried to poison her with pesticide mixed with sandwiches she usually uses at breakfast. At that time, I became more and more villainous. Everything went according to my plan. It happened on Sunday morning, in September, full of sunshine and wind. Such a beautiful day to do my plan. Luckily, Dad and stepmom were absent from home in order to went on a 7-day Hong Kong tour. This was the ideal time to do that. I woke up quite earlier than usual before Alice went downstairs and made breakfast for her. I started mixing an amount of pesticide onto sandwiches. When everything was done, I went upstairs to ask Alice to have breakfast with me. She nodded her head, agreed without any hesitation. I smiled because my plan was just about complete in first step. About 15 minutes later, Alice woke up, went to the kitchen and had breakfast like she used to do before. It almost seemed like she was comfortable enjoying sandwiches. She even smiled at me. In a minute, I immediately felt bad. I wondered if she deserved to be treated that way. Shortly after this, I told myself that I had to be stable with my decision I made before, unshakable. So I still continued to implement my plan. I could not turn back. Later, after eating her first bite, her face was contorted. Maybe the poison worked on her body. She writhed in agony, laid on the ground with horrible stomach pains. She frowned, stared at me as if she was reproaching me, and in her eyes, there was a desperate disappointment and a little pain. Suddenly, she grabbed my leg, her large eyes looked up to me, and begged me to save her. I stood quietly, like my feet were being buried. In that moment, I burst into tears, just felt terrified and guilty, then started to panic. I didn't know what to do next. Alice looked at me doubtfully, like she could be able to see my soul. I felt like I was a criminal. I know what she thought about me. At that time, I saw desperation. Apparently, she already knew the whole thing. I was actually supposed to pick up the phone and call an ambulance. All of a sudden, Lena, my next door neighbor, came in, screamed aloud. "What's happening, Alice? Are you okay? What's wrong with you?" I was shocked and had no idea how she could be here. In this kind of situation, not hesitating, she took a taxi to the hospital to save Alice's life. After receiving emergency treatment, she was in better condition. Waiting outside the hospital's hall, to be honest, I worried about her situation. I really thought she was going to die. My dad and stepmom got the news, so they canceled the trip and came home immediately. They also worried about her. They really wanted to know what made her like that. My dad and stepmother believed that I was the one who made that thing. Especially my dad. He always said that was my fault, and stepmom continued to insist that I was the one who made trouble. I stood there, didn't say anything with a worried look on my face. I was afraid that they would see my real face. I was afraid that my dad would slap me again and I would not be able to get love from my dad, the thing that I always desire. But Alice suddenly told them that she just said she ate expired food because he was too hungry. I felt blessed to hear these words from her. If she told the truth, I didn't know what I might be facing with others around me. Although her disease progressed fast, her stomach was no longer able to eat as much as once she did. One thing that surprised me is the way she treated me after. Alice didn't blame me for what I did to her, even if it caused adverse health effects for the rest of her life. I apologized to her and didn't ask for forgiveness. I knew that I was not worthy to deserve forgiveness from her, and I would live with regrets for my entire lifetime. I took myself very seriously back in the following days. After that incident, I was always blame yourself for what the stupid thing I did before. I ruined both my stepsister's life and mine. I seemed to have become an evil full of toxic negativity and foolishness. Since that day, I have a different look about her. I do feel better and no longer hate her. Alice deserves to be treated so well, and she isn't the root cause of all my problems like I used to think. Instead of being insecure about my weaknesses, I have accepted and learned ways to improve them. I hope that by telling my story, you guys will learn to be more patient. Think carefully before undertaking anything.